Coming up this Saturday, January 13th, down at the DCU Center, it's going to be the second ever Worcester Railers Worcester IceCats night as the Railers play host to the Norfolk Admirals. I had the chance now here to talk with the former voice of the Worcester IceCats, John Wiedeman, as he is currently the voice of the Chicago Blackhawks. John, thanks so much for taking the time here today to talk about the IceCats.
Anytime. Talk about the IceCats anytime, any day. Great memories.
Now, you were with the IceCats during some of their early years, 94 through 96.
Right.
First off, just talk about what it was like when you first got the job. How did you first become the first voice of the IceCats?
You really want to hear the story? Because it's it's kind of long, but I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version. I just left the draft in Hartford in 1994. It was June. And I was driving back. I lived in Michigan at the time, and I worked in the Colonial Hockey League for Muskegon Fury. And I was trying to get a job at the American Hockey League level. And back then, there was another league that was comparable to the American Hockey League. They didn't hit as much. It was the IHL. So I wanted to take that step up to the next level because I felt like I was ready. And so I went to the draft thinking that I could meet people that would be involved and knowing where the jobs were, and maybe pick a few brains, kind of act like a politician, shake hands and get to know people and press the flesh, so to speak. And leaving the draft, I remember I was driving up, I think it's 91 that comes out of Hartford and goes to Springfield. And when you get to Springfield, you hit the Mass Pike and you can go left or right. Now, I could have gone left and gone back to Michigan, right? Because I knew I had a job there. Or I could have gone right and I could have gone to Boston. And that's a place I'd never been. And I always wanted to go see Boston. So, you know what? I had a couple of extra days of vacation. I thought, you only live once. I'm going to turn right. Had my dog in the back. So I turn right and I'm wheeling down the Mass Pike. And not long after that turn, I see a big sign, Worcester, like the next town, next big town. I think it was like 40 miles, something like that. And I had a hockey news on the seat next to me. Okay. The paper version. Now, you're too young to know the way the hockey news was produced. Tim. Back then they would it was like a newspaper, like a periodical almost. And I had it on the front seat of my car and I had the back part of it turned over. And there was a minor league section there. And in the very bottom corner was a little, I don't know, a little story, maybe 2 column inches, maybe about that big. And it talked about this expansion team coming into the American Hockey League called the Worcester IceCats. And the fact that Roy Bowe was going to own the team and that a man named Jim Roberts was going to be the general manager. So I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, that's like the next town, and I had my resumes, I had cassette tapes, that's what we used back then, and samples of my work in little portfolio packets. And I thought, and this was like a Monday or a Tuesday, I can't remember which. And I remember thinking to myself, I got nothing to lose. I mean, I'm thinking they're probably going to hire somebody from back this way anyway. So I've got nothing to lose. I can just stop in. Hopefully I'll get to meet somebody that has something to do with deciding on the position and see where it goes. Well, sure enough, I show up and I'm wearing a pullover windbreaker and beach volleyball shorts and sneakers and socks. I didn't look like somebody that was going to make a professional call in any way, but I thought, go ahead, who cares, right? I mean, and lo and behold, I walk into this office. I find out where the IceCats office was. It was not at 303 Main Street at that time. It was in a different location. And I walk into the office and I took my briefcase with me. Back then I had a briefcase. And I walk in, they were open. They were actually open. And there were 2 people in there. There was a receptionist and Jim Roberts. And the office was not very big. And I remember walking in, giving my card from Muskegon to the receptionist. And I said, is it possible I could speak with Jim Roberts? And she says, hold on one second. She walks about 20 feet in the other direction, gives Jim Roberts the card. He looks at it. He looks up at me. He says, oh, yeah, Johnny, come on back. Like we'd known each other for 10 years. And I was just taken aback by this, but I thought, hey, this may be an open door. Go for it. I walked over, shook his hand, sat down. We talked for probably 2 hours.
Wow.
And I left him my information. And he says, you stay in touch with me. He says, phone me about every week to 10 days. He says, I'm not sure what we're going to do. He says, we are going to need a radio guy. And he says, this is June, remember. They don't make those decisions usually till later in the summer. And so I did. I did exactly what, he asked me to do. And then during that summer, all the other teams that I had applied for, there were 13 of them in total, including the IceCats, one by one. No, no, no. I got these rejection letters. Thank you for sending your information. We've gone with another candidate. Anybody that's been in the process knows what I'm talking about. It stinks. So we get to August 16th, my birthday. And I was at my desk in Muskegon, and I was going to go to lunch and go let my dog out. And I was pushing myself away from my desk, and my phone rings. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, who could this be, right? And I pick it up and I go, hello, this is John. And at the other end is Jimmy Roberts from Worcester. He goes, Johnny, this is Jimmy Roberts in Worcester. And my eyes lit up. I kind of, yeah, Jim, how you doing? He goes, yeah. Johnny, we want you to be our effing radio guy. He says, how quick can you get here? And that's how I got the job. And
Wow.
those are two of the best years I ever spent in hockey. I mean, such great people there. I had so much fun. I learned so much. And for my money, Jimmy Roberts, the guy that I work for, is the greatest man I've ever met in hockey. And I've met a lot of people in this game, and he's right at the top.
So as you got to know him and as you started to create these memories in Worcester, what were some of the first memories you really had of coming to the city and sort of getting yourself established?
Well, not knowing anybody and only driving through the area a couple of times, I was kind of disoriented, but I thought, hey, I've gotten to know other places, and I'll get to know this place too. And I remember looking for a place, and somebody, I can't remember who, tipped me off. He said, go try Westboro. He said, there's some really nice places in Westboro. So I drove down one of the main streets in Westboro, and I remember finding a place called the Piccadilly Pub right in the center of town. And I'm not a drinker. I don't drink, but I thought that's kind of a cool place, and I drove around, and I just happened to bump into a guy who was driving in the other direction. And he says, where are you going? I said, well, I'm not sure. I said, I'm looking for a place to live. He says, are you single? I said, yeah. He says, I might have a place for you. And I followed him over to this apartment, and I said, this is perfect, and I remember writing him a check on the spot for the down payment. Then I had to go back to Michigan and move, but it was all part of it. But first perceptions of the city were like, okay, this is definitely a working class kind of a city. It's New England. New England is beautiful. And I'm sure the hockey fans here, they have an appetite for the game. So I think I'm going to like this. I remember feeling that way. I said, I think I'm going to like this. And I did.
That's fantastic. Now, actually, a brief aside, you said, so you first lived in Westboro. You familiar with a
Yeah.
little restaurant called Harry's?
I think I remember Harry's. I think I do. I'm trying to, I'm not going to sit here and tell you a bold-faced lie, but I think I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah. I used to get my laundry done at a place right up the street from where I lived, and they were great people too. Anyway.
Very nice. Now, of course, as you were with Worcester and that being one of your first stories, tell us a little bit about life on the road as you were the radio voice of the team. You travel with the team. Any great moments from the road traveling with the IceCats that might have stood out to you?
Oh yeah, there was never a dull moment that first year. Keep in mind that first year we weren't affiliated with any NHL team. We were an independent. And so I actually had to help Jimmy find guys to come to Worcester and play. And, I was way out of my league with that, but I thought, what can it hurt? I mean, we're all trying to pull the same way here. So we pulled in guys from, all over the place. One of them was a friend of mine, Rob Melanson, who came from Muskegon. Really, really tough guy. But when we go on the road, we had a trainer, our equipment guy. His name was Steve Benoit, and Benny was inclined to pull a prank or two. And he wasn't shy about doing it to the broadcaster of the team. And so I was like a regular target. Uh, I can tell you a couple quick stories. We went for a skate down on the Centrum Ice one day, and it was me with, I think Eddie Crayer was there. He was our assistant general manager. Great guy, Eddie. And Benny was in goal, and then he just suddenly left. He said, I got to go fix some equipment or something like that. Well, I trusted him. I didn't really think anything about it. Little did I know that Benny got out of his goaltending equipment and he went and filled up a 5-gallon bucket of water. And as we were busy passing the puck around on the ice and having fun, Benny was scaling the steps to the catwalk. And he got up on the catwalk right above the goal at the one end where the Zamboni comes out. You know, the Zamboni comes out of that corner. It's at that end right there. And Walt Podubny, who was ended up being a player coach for the team in that first year, he says, John, he says, go dig some pucks out of the net, will you? And I said, yeah, sure. And I skated right down. I stopped in the crease and I'm digging pucks out. All of a sudden, I just get hit with a shower of cold water. It was Benny from the catwalk. Okay. That was just a direct hit. He used to mess with my post-game food on the road. I'd order like chicken parm with penne pasta, no garlic. And he would take that, he'd scratch it out, he'd write in extra garlic. And instead of chicken parm, he'd say rotini and clams or something like that. And I get my food, like this happened in Portland all the time. I get my food and I'd look at it, I'd open it up, I'd say, this isn't what I ordered. And 2 seats in front of me, Benny is like just laughing. And I finally caught on. Jimmy Roberts kind of clued me in on what was going on there. When we were in the Maritimes one time, I got a thing called the Cup of Poo Award. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is a family kind of a situation, but suffice it to say that one of the boys went a little overboard with an ice bucket, and you can guess the rest, and left it in my room and turned on the heat. And I was down at a team meal at the time. When I came back into my room, it was unbearable. So I got that. They put crickets in my equipment, shoe polish on the headsets, so that black shoe polish on the headset. So when I would put the headset on and I would take it off, I'd have these black rings around my ears and I looked like a raccoon. There were other things that went on. We had a lot of fun together. By mid-season, we were a pretty tight group. And though we lost a lot in the first half of that season, the second half of that season, I'm proud to say that nobody in that league really wanted to play us because we outworked everybody. That was really our source of pride.
Tim, there's one other guy I want to talk about, and got to know him pretty well. And I really learned a lot from him. And I enjoyed working with him. And that's Bill Ballou. He used to cover the IceCats for the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. For my money, he was the best writer in New England. I loved getting up in the morning with a cup of coffee and picking up the paper and reading what he wrote about the IceCats. Because not only did I know that I was there when he's writing about, when he was describing a lot of the things that were happening in his story. I remember being there, seeing what he was describing, but he had a great wit about him, and he could spin the story and perfectly intertwine that New England sarcasm into it and make it really funny and make it interesting and cover the story really soup to nuts. He was just a true pro in my estimation. I think he was a bigger type of a writer than the Worcester area. I'm sure he could have gone to some major city. I don't know that he wanted to, but I just loved his writing and his coverage of the team. He was so dedicated and so thorough. He knew pretty much everything that was going on, and not only in Worcester, but in the hockey world as well. And great friend, great man. And if he's there tonight, how you doing, Bill? Hope everything is good. Hope to see you soon.
John, tell us, if you will, to the IceCats. Of course, the Railers have tracks now. The Rail Yard Dog is the mascot, but Scratch is going to be coming back this Saturday too. Anything you have on Scratch, what you might know about the former mascot?
Mark Ravelli. He was an outstanding mascot. Mark, he was a tremendous athlete. And I remember when we had the mascot tryouts, we had this sequence of events that the guys had to do in order to try and demonstrate they were able to, wear a mascot's costume and, go through the gyrations or whatever. And Mark came up to me and he says, "I want to go last." And I went, "Okay, good enough." I kind of kept my eye on him. And the rest of them went through the line, and there were some that did okay. Mark goes through the line and he completely stole the show. And we all looked at each other. We said, "That's our guy right there. This guy, whoever this guy is, that's our guy." And it turned out to be a guy named Mark Ravelli. And Mark, I hope he's there tonight. Mark, you were an awesome mascot, man. We had a lot of fun together. Nobody wore that mascot's costume better than Mark Ravelli. He could almost do, maybe it's an exaggeration to say that he could do a backflip on his skates, but I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, he was that kind of an athlete, and he really put on a great show.
Now, as you're talking about, as you guys would outplay people during your time with the IceCats, who were some of your favorite players to watch and call games for?
Well, it was only 2 years. Okay. So my list will start with a guy named Roy Mitchell, who has become a lifelong friend of mine. Mitch ended up being the captain of the IceCats in the second year. There were a lot of really, I thought, just great guys. I enjoyed getting to know all of those guys. I used to love watching a guy that's still there in the area, Sean Hafey. Great talent. Sean Hafey had tremendous talent. He wasn't the biggest guy, but man, could he could make things happen on the ice. Great skill. He's from Sudbury. He married a local girl there, and he's still in the area. And Sean, if you're sitting in the crowd, hi, buddy. I hope you're doing okay. He was fun to talk about, fun to watch. I remember going and hitting golf balls with him one time. He could just kill a golf ball. He could crush a golf ball, hit it 330 yards, no problem. And a tremendous athlete. Rob Melanson, I remember mentioning Mel earlier in this conversation. Rob was our policeman our first year. Still a great friend. He lives back in Muskegon. That second year team, we went through quite a few guys because we were affiliated with both the St. Louis Blues and the New York Islanders. And we led the league in transactions, 127 transactions that year. Yeah. And the flights from Hartford to St. Louis were frequent with the Blues players because Mike Keenan was the general manager in St. Louis. And he had a veteran team, and he liked to keep them kind of on their toes. So he'd secretively fly in guys from the Worcester IceCats for morning skates. And without saying a word, the threat was, if you don't get going, this kid's going to take your job. And that didn't last that long. I mean, we went through the end of the year. He ended up trading away like 3 or 4 really good players in the trade that brought Wayne Gretzky from the Los Angeles Kings to the St. Louis Blues. 3 of the guys that left were IceCats. So I remember that. I also remember the goaltenders that we had. Wayne Cowley, that first year, was the first ever IceCat to win the Sherwood Player of the Month award. Les Kuntar was another guy that he was with that first year team. He ended up playing in Hershey and then eventually with the Philadelphia Flyers. The second year we had kids. We had Jason Widmer and Jarrett Dooling, who both made it to the New York Islanders. We had a goaltender named Eric Fichot, who was a top draft pick by the Islanders, and he ended up going on Super Bowl Sunday. He ended up going to the Islanders that year. We ended up making the playoffs. We had the good fortune. The second year we were there, we made the playoffs, played the Portland Pirates, lost in 4 games, and that's the last time that Jimmy Roberts and I were ever together for a hockey game because Jimmy ended up taking a job as an assistant coach with the St. Louis Blues not long after that. But great memories of 2 wonderful years in Worcester. Outstanding people. And I'll tell you something, Tim, you're going to find out people do make the difference no matter where you go. Because the year after I left Worcester, I went to Philadelphia and I was with the Flyers for the 96-97 season. And I learned that lesson again there. People make the difference.
So as you talk about, people making the difference, so to speak, your nephew, Paul O'Leary, actually shared a bit of a story with me that Rich Lundeen, current president of the Worcester Railers Booster Club, You actually sold him his first ever season ticket back with the IceCats back in the day. If you remember that story at all, or just talk a bit more about the people that you met here in Worcester.
Yeah, I'm going to have to admit I can't remember that because that was at a time when we were really busy. Like we were doing everything we could to try and meet the demand. There was actually demand. People that would come to us and say, "Hey, how can I get involved?" And they wanted merchandise. There were people that wanted season tickets. And I'm not going to say it was an easy sell because it never was. But there was enthusiasm at the time because it was so brand new, and there were a lot of people that wanted to jump on board. And it was encouraging to me because my heart was in it right from the start, and meeting all those great people and some of them buying the season tickets and getting to know them in other ways. I mean, that's just invaluable. I have friends back there to this day that I still talk to. And, whenever we go back into the area, I should mention that my wife is from the area. She's from Auburn. And, we have a couple children. We love going back to the area and visiting family and seeing everybody, seeing old friends and getting back together. I can mention a couple of friends that I have from the area. Brian Jensen is one of my dearest friends. He lives up in Barry Paxton Road, north of the city. Jeff Spofford, a man he's an attorney there. Great man, Jeff Spofford is. A good family. He's a longtime friend. And a guy named Mike Sawarda, who is also an attorney. And he has been my representative, actually, for the last, let's say, a decade or so. Mike and I love talking to him because he loves hockey. I got to know him through the IceCats as well. And so these casual acquaintances turn into sometimes lifetime friendships, and they just enrich your life. I was very, very fortunate to have had that experience and to meet all of those great people.
So as you're now the voice of the Chicago Blackhawks, you've been getting to call Connor Bedard, and you got to call so many great moments as the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup a number of times through the mid-teens rather.
Yeah.
Talk about how your time in Worcester helped to really propel you in your broadcasting career and what that did for you.
Well, what it did for me, there's no question about it. It gave me confidence, confidence in my abilities to broadcast hockey. I knew that I could work at least at the American Hockey League level. I knew that. And I knew I had to pay my dues someplace before I got there. And I didn't mind 2 years in Muskegon, Michigan. It's a beautiful place. And I've got a lot of friends back there too. But I was just dying to get to the next level at that time in my life. I felt the sense of urgency because I was not a young man. I was an older man. I was in my 30s. And I felt like, I've really got to push this. I've got to do something. And so I did. And I had the good fortune of landing that job in Worcester. I was there for 2 years, and I had the good fortune really of getting to the NHL in my 5th season with the Philadelphia Flyers, the 1996-97 season. And we went all the way to the Stanley Cup final that year. That was the year of the Legion of Doom line in Philadelphia, Eric Lindros, John LeClaire, Michael Renberg, and others. And that was a terrific team. Great guys. Actually, it's funny. The Edmonton Oilers were in town yesterday, and Paul Coffey was a member of that team in Philadelphia. And I got to know Koff during the year, just a regular, down-to-earth, great guy and a Hall of Fame hockey player. So I'm in the dressing room yesterday in the morning skate talking to one of the Edmonton Oilers, and who walks across the floor of the dressing room to come shake my hand? It's Paul Coffey. I mean, he could have ignored me like I was a pile of garbage, but it's just the kind of guy he was. He came across and shook my hand and said, "Hey, how have you been? And great to see you," and that kind of thing. That year I knew that it was going to be my one and only year in Philadelphia, and I left. And I left because it just wasn't the right fit for me. And I knew there was a better situation out there. And eventually I found it in the Chicago Blackhawks. It's the team that I wanted to broadcast for my entire life. And it's the one job I thought I'd never get. And in 2006, I had the good fortune of landing it. And what a ride.
That's remarkable. Now thinking a little bit more about the IceCats and really sort of professional hockey in Worcester as a whole. Just last season, Worcester celebrated what has been 25 years of professional hockey in the city of Worcester.
Right.
Of course, the IceCats, Sharks, and now the Railers. Talk about sort of the legacy of professional hockey in the city and how important that has been to the area and all that over the years.
Yeah, well, it's definitely got to be a two-way street, Tim. I mean, you can put a product on the ice in an arena in some town, and if the fans don't show up, you're not going to be there that long, because typically in minor league spots, they're dependent on ticket sales and residual revenues to be able to pay their bills. I know that one of the fears of broadcasters, and I've had it before, is that, when the summer comes and the off season comes, you wonder, is the team going to be in business the coming fall? And so what you do is you get busy during that summer and you get out there and beat the pavement and sell tickets and sell corporate sponsorship to enable that team to stay in the area. And typically, if you have an area like what I found Worcester to be, which was very receptive to what the IceCats brought, it becomes kind of a partnership. You value your fans as if they are your lifeblood, because they are. And you're fortunate that you're in an area in New England where hockey is big. I mean, going back to the days of Bobby Orr with the Boston Bruins, that grew hockey in the area like never before. And there were residuals to that. I mean, there were areas where the sport just boomed and more people got involved. And they got involved as little guys, and they grew up loving the game, watching it on TV. And then when that comes to your town, you embrace that and you kind of think about, well, this is something that's now ours, and it's our responsibility to try and keep it here any way we can. So that's the way I felt about the Worcester area. I always felt that everybody that came to an IceCats game was kind of like a family member, kind of. I mean, it was the IceCats family. And, it was us against the rest of the league. I didn't mind that. But we had a lot of fun, too. I mean, we enjoyed the games that were there. They didn't win all the time. Sometimes they had some bad losses, but everybody knew there was going to be another game and, thankfully another season. And that's kind of the way things evolved. And I'm happy to say that area, in my opinion, is one of the strongest hockey areas in the world.
It's something that certainly the fans still think back fondly on the IceCats, and I know that this is going to be a big weekend coming up here at the DCU Center. But sort of talk, if you can, a little bit to how that sort of legacy has evolved over the years. With the Railers still in town and kind of what they've been doing lately for the community, all the work that's been done.
Mm-hmm. Well, the community aspect of that is enormous. When we first moved into town, we realized that in order to get that two-way street, we needed to step out of the office. We couldn't just harbor ourselves in the office and say, okay, come buy your tickets, come buy the corporate sponsorship, come buy the merchandise, because without us reaching out, that wasn't going to happen. Maybe some of it would happen, but to the extent that was necessary, if you don't reach out and you don't get to be a part of the community, you may be a one and done as a hockey team, and you probably aren't going to be that well received within that community. So we did a lot of interactive things. I remember with the IceCats early on, we got involved with schools. I'll share a name with you. I don't even know if he's still in the area, but there was a really, really nice man named Tom Brindisi. He was at Jacob Hyatt School, and we used to take our players over to his school, and they would read to the kids and they would get to know them. They'd be wearing their IceCats sweaters, and they were young guys who they had done this kind of thing in junior hockey or maybe in college, and they got it. They understood that this is part of reaching out to the community. And we had a lot of those guys on occasion that would get out to different schools and go and see the kids. We do community types of involvement with like Rotary Club types of things where we would appear and we would talk, banquets. I know that the Booster Club was pretty active that way as well. And it all was part of bringing more people in and exposing them to what the IceCats did. The Sharks came along after that, and in their own way, I think they did the same thing. And now it's good to know that the Railers are doing the same thing, because the community is there. The hockey fans are there. They just kind of need a reason to align with the team. And by reaching out to them and saying, come on down and see our product, these are the prices. I mean, for some people, it's very hard to reach into their pockets and pull out money and put it down on hockey tickets. But if they know they're going to come and they're going to have a good time there, they're going to be entertained, their kids are going to enjoy it, it's going to be wholesome fun, and they'll see a great hockey game in the process. I don't think you can beat that. And so when you talk about a legacy with the city of Worcester, that's what comes to mind for me, is that unspoken partnership between the team and the great fans there.
So, John, as we look to wrap up here, looking back at your time as broadcaster of the IceCats in their first 2 years, a lot of times broadcasters get asked, if they have any sort of catchphrases they like to use, anything like that. Did you have anything that really was sort of a calling card on your IceCats broadcasts?
I had one thing that comes to mind, and it was just something I kind of created, just for fun. That first year, we didn't win a lot of games. I think we won 24 games. I can't recall the record offhand, but we did win some games, and it was usually in the back half of the season. And there was a defenseman on the team that first year. His name was Dave Basigio. And Dave went to Yale. He played hockey at Yale. And he left the IceCats, and in time, he became the assistant general manager of the Anaheim Ducks. But Dave became a friend, and I told him, I said, you score a goal. I said, I'm gonna go with something. There was a comedian at the time. His name was Dom Irera. He's out of Philadelphia, and I find him to be very, very funny. He used to say a thing. He used to do a thing where he would say "bada boom, bada bing." It was like the all-purpose Italian saying. So I thought, Dave Basigio, being of Italian descent, if he scores a goal, I'm going to work in the phrase "bada boom, bada bing." And sure enough, Dave scored 10 goals that year. And with everyone, I said, Basigio, bada boom, bada bing. And you know what? I did it for fun. And I was amazed at how people came back to me and said, I love that goal call with Dave Basigio. I was, oh yeah, bada boom, bada bing, huh? Like that. It would be a way of starting a conversation and a way of getting to know people. And so I felt it was a really, really good thing.
Now,
that's the one that comes to mind.
No, that's excellent. Now, in wrapping here, as the Railers get set to turn into the IceCats for one more night here on January the 13th, coming up at the DCU Center, any message you have to IceCats fans who are getting ready to watch the team this weekend?
IceCats fans, I will never forget you. We had a great time in those 2 years I was there. There's a part of me that wishes that I didn't leave when I did, 1996. I love the area. I love the people. I had a lot of friends, and I was amazed at how many friends I was able to make in just 2 years. And I didn't know it at the time because I was so busy, but it was really one of the best times of my life. And I told you that people make the difference, Tim. I learned that the people of Worcester were some of the best people I'd ever met, and salt of the earth, hardworking, down to earth people, great people. And I went from there to other situations, and I learned that the people weren't as great. And so again, people make the difference. But those 2 years in Worcester are always going to be special for me. Thank you, guys.
John Wiedeman is the current voice of the Chicago Blackhawks on the radio, former voice of the Worcester IceCats. John, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Happy to do it, Tim.
So the Worcester Railers get set to turn into the IceCats this Saturday, January 13th. Be sure to make your way down to the DCU Center, formerly known as the Centrum, to catch the team in action.